Now the so-called analyzation of the so-called news. Two battles that man can never ultimately win, or conversely must ultimately always lose. Those struggles with inanimate objects and those struggles with routine distractions which pass himself off as intelligence. And the rhetorical, if not musical, question was then asked about who amongst such a fine-looking, upstanding group would have the timidity, the impertinence, the impudence to ask if the two are not actually one and the same. I think, speaking at least for most men in the audience, I don't like the first part, and I'm not about losing the inanimate. I don't see a need to go any further. If there's any basic validity to this whole news item than just the first part. I mean, why did somebody have to rub our noses in it? Are we going to shift over while no one's noticing into some sort of something resembling allegory? At least a metaphor for allegory. You can fix up your transmission time and time again. But you do know this, don't you? By the time you die, or shortly thereafter, by the time they pay off that funeral,
Yes.
that the transactional, the universal, some part is going to go and have the last laugh. Put to you another way, if you were really ordinary and religious, I guess, and trying to make that allegorical, you'd think, well, you'd be a Hindu or a Buddhist or something, and you'd say, ah, yes, looking off reflectively, ah, yes, the impertinence of the mundane physical world. Now, I see that misses it. That makes them feel good, like, ah, yes, the impertinence of gold and silver. It's only, of course, poor people that say that. I've never heard a rich person, look at gold and silver and go, where were you when I, lead you later? Nuh-uh, it's here right now, just like sex. Different story. The ordinaries, I don't have to tell you this, have for long, philosophically, if not religiously, tried to wax upon and reflect on the impertinence of the physical world. How cheap it is, some kind of illusionary work of the devil. Think about this. You know why they don't like it? Because it's going to outlive them. You can laugh at your old cheap, 59 DeSoto. Plus you got people nowadays young enough to go, a DeSoto, what the hell is that? And there it is, you still trying to get another 200,000 miles off of it, and it continues to break down, and you curse it, and you kick it. And then a Hindu comes along, or a Buddhist, and comes along and says, ah, yes, the impertinence, the fallibility of mere man-made objects. And then they kind of look off like there's something else, and you go, well, how true? And you join in and give it one more kick. Just remember this. No matter what happens, now if you want to really get technical, somewhat we could go back with grub worms and viruses in the dirt, and years after you've been buried, you're dead and gone, we can find pieces of you. I know all that. But it's not that hard to find that DeSoto. Think about all the people who don't know what they're doing, joining in about, yes, the impertinence, the impermanence, just the uselessness of the material world. Maybe it makes them feel good. Of course, when you're dead, everything makes you feel good because then you don't know. Because if you did, you'd walk through cemeteries and you would hear what I'm saying. You'd hear little voices come out of the ground going, I wonder if that damn DeSoto's still running. That cheap son of a bitch, the way, it put me in the poorhouse when I was alive, and now here I am dead trying to rest easy, and every now and then I hear this noise go by, and I think, that's that goddamn, DeSoto still running, going, ha ha! I did remember to point out this was not allegorical. This had no significance. It was something that they slipped in the news. It's nothing other than it appeared to be. Hormones said we can make ourselves happy almost any time we want to. And Neurons just pouted. And the footnote was, in the above, it was pointed out that the Neurons just pouted. It did not say that they could only pout. And there was a series which, if you had a kind of sequential kind of hearing, I assume you noticed, having to do with thought, city thought, and was saying city thought was this and that and this and that. And so perhaps I was going to tie some of them together here, having to do with captivity. They didn't pull them all out, I don't think, but you remember the sequence, or the series in general. Here's one that says a follow-up. It was done last time, if you recall, that local conditions in one place was having a drink and a good time with some of his fellow local conditions. And he pointed this out. This time we changed it a little bit to be a little more specific, derived from that story, a point-blank definition. A thinker, a supposed dead man who refuses to lie down. This is back again, not trying to give anybody any particular kind of blues, because if you want to feel bad, you can go somewhere that's easier than listening to this kind of stuff. So not trying to give you the blues about age, because nobody's really that old, and if you are, tough shit, what are you going to do about it? But the thing is, by now you should have some kind of insight, some kind of your own awareness of the fact that by and large, well, without any doubt, you started dying hormonally. At the age of 20, 21, 22 nowadays. Then you started going downhill that way. But also, very close to it, and I'll leave it up to you to look to any kind of serendipity, you seriously began to wane. Trying to make it sound better than die. Wane intellectually. Those of you that now are not in the same kind of condition that you were some years back, you can, without any problem, realize that in one sense you were really dying, and it was natural. And I've described it in all kinds of ways. It's no big secret. It is just not analyzed to any particular personal benefit. That everyone's aware of the fact. If you present it in the proper way to almost anybody, you point out, have you noticed, you sit around talking to some guy, college bookstore, even if you're 40, 50, and you just happen to go in there and you turn around at the coffee shop there next to the college bookstore, and you sit down and you're talking to some guy, and you ask him, what's he doing? He's majoring in this and that, and you're talking about how you enjoy school, and he talks about the course that he likes, and you just talk a little bit about intellectual activity and the fun. You maybe throw in, well, I was in school one time, and I always enjoyed those years. And so the guy, let's say he's getting close. Maybe how about even a graduate student? And you start saying, have you noticed, was it just me? Like when you got into college when? 19? The guy said, yeah. Have you noticed now you're what, 23, 24 and graduating? Yeah. Was it just me, or have you noticed that it doesn't seem quite as much fun, or is quite as much as easy to study now as it was when you were 19? And you don't have to talk to anybody or anything, and all you got to do is just put it the right way, and the person will go, well, yeah. And if you gave him a look like, well, what do you make of it? Have you thought about it? And he might say, well, I'd actually never thought about it, but I guess you just kind of get tired of it. It's like enough's enough. How long are you going to go to school? I don't know. I listen to. You understand? You've done it yourself. Do I have to do more? A man, he will say, well, it's like I don't know. It's like my head's just so crammed full of crap now. I just want to get out and live. Now, what he's saying is, it's about time to lay down and start dying. It's like now I'm 21, 22. There is no magical age, but somewhere nowadays in the early third decade at least, it's that you are supposed to be all but dead. As witnessed again by what is far beyond a metaphor, it is a symbolic thought, as you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I know it sounds metaphorical, and I even admitted it was because it seems to be true, and so it's what it is and something else, which, at any rate, people understand that it gets hard, difficult. They would agree to this. It gets difficult the older you get to try and learn anything. It's just no secret. But it is not even on the same level. You could take a man who's been a couch potato physically for 30 or 40 years, overweight, and he starts having heart problems, and he has an uncle that dies about the same age. Now, his family physician says, if you don't get some exercise and drop 40 pounds, you're going to be there. And so for whatever reason, that may shake the guy up, and the doctor will admit, that's all he wants to talk about, is, boy, I've taken up running, I've taken up walking, jogging, I go to the gym, and it's about to drive me nuts. I can't hardly, here I am, whatever it is, 45 years old, and here I am for the first time. I hadn't done anything like this since I was a teenager. Yeah. But if you tried to point out that there is something that's even more intensely challenging here, they would admit that, yes, it is hard to learn. This is, again, no secret with ordinary people. To say it is hard, not to, if we switch this over to from the physical and the man being in the gym. If we took a guy 45 years old, for some reason, his firm said, we're going to have to let you go, suddenly at your age, unless you'll transfer to our plant in Mexico. It's the only thing we can do. And you got 2 weeks to learn Spanish. And the man ordinarily, back when he was a teenager, back when he was lithe, and was, before he became an overweight couch potato, he was also not only physically adroit, which is not really correct, physically graceful, active, but was also intellectually adroit, which is superfluous to say. That when he was a teenager, he could have learned Spanish operationally, enough to function in 2 weeks or months. And now he's just confronted with, you got to learn a language in the next 4 weeks or your job's gone. The man might as well commit suicide. Everyone knows that, well, hey man, at my age, and they don't know how to express it, you can say, well, what? Is your brain gone to fat? Have you become an intellect? You mean you can't do that? And everybody knows, well, and they'd have some story. Well, I don't know whether I could or not, but Jesus, that's too much to ask of me. I've been working here for 35 years. How are you going to ask me to? I don't know. It's, I can't stay up and study. Back to the news item. I don't guess I have to keep doing all these little caveats and etc. But literally, all you got to do is look around. It's not a plot. It's not a conspiracy. There's nothing wrong with you, speaking generically. All you have to do is look around at humanity. If you can look at a point-blank wall with no biased opinion of it, and you realize that something happened to you hormonally. Everybody, when you sexually matured, more or less, in your 20s, and it started kind of slipping. It doesn't seem many people it strikes them, to carry this a little bit further, it seems to strike everybody in some real way, women's menopause and men's middle-age crazes, that they really realize, whew, not only sexually in other ways, I'm getting fat, and men getting pot bellies, and women getting hips the size of Rhode Island. They seem to suddenly be struck that the hormones go down so fast at certain ages, which is represented by them, I suggest, menopause and middle-age crazes with men, that they suddenly realize most of my life's gone. There is nowhere to look now but death. That I'm suddenly 40 years old, and it's not like, well, I'll be famous next year. I'm going to die next year. That they just suddenly realize life, for all intents and purposes, the glory of it's over. I lost it. And that's the way it comes out neurally. Here is the point, all the way from the sexual maturity when the hormones start dying, is intellectually. You are supposed to be dead. Now, I know it's crude, and I know that's not the way it seems, but if you look operationally, it is a fact. Back to what a thinker is. A supposed dead man who refuses to lie down. No one expects it. Of course, you're not doing it for anyone's appreciation. You can't, and etc. But somebody, past the age just more or less the 20s, a man who would relentlessly try, not learn something, but to think, is a dead man who refuses to lie down. Because if some way you could take an ordinary, sane person, and I'll just make it simple, and you could make them know what you were trying to do. And of course, I'm not going to ask you to explain what it is you're trying to do here, because you still can't. And I don't want you to lie about it. But you know what I mean, most of it. Trying to think more than is necessary. Not in any particular way, not for any reason, beyond all forms of captivity and opinions, anything that makes any sense, but not insanity and all that. If you could make an ordinary person know what you'd been doing, what you were trying to do, and just for a split second, they could see it without their own partisan thought. You know what their feeling would be, don't you? It would be, why? I mean, if they heard it. Well, let's say you could stretch it more than just momentarily. What if you could stretch it maybe for a minute? And you said, I have, for the last X number of years, devoted more of my effort, as far as any specific area, to trying to do this than I have anything else. And they could hear it for even that long, and for them to ponder it for a couple of seconds. They'd only have one question, and it'd be proper. It'd come both from hormones and neurons, and them at the ordinary level would be, why? It's like life's already killed you. Life's already given you an excuse. Let me use that point then. That life, how old are you, man? Maybe you say, 45, whatever you are. And they say, didn't you realize it was long about your early 20s? Life said, okay, ease up. And life kind of fitted you, got you, used to laying like this. took your measurements, said, hey, you've done enough. You've screwed enough, you've eaten enough. Well, you've exercised enough. You hadn't eaten enough because you still got to put on some weight. We got the middle-age spreads coming up. But it says, you've exercised enough, which many, 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 many people just feel like, phew, thank God I'm out of college, I'm off that damn football scholarship. Screw exercise. If I ever hear a whistle blowing, somebody holler scrimmage, I'll strangle them. I'm gonna get married and get me a damn house trailer and go to a pot and drink a lot of beer. You know what I mean? That is obvious. That's why it's funny. That's why people make jokes about it. But notice there is no humor about this. And there's not even any general awareness that you, in the same way, get past that age, and it's though life has given you permission. All right, hey, no more football, no more exercise. You don't have to. And there it is, a guy's 21 or 22. And from one view, you could say, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, he's going to live another 40 or 50 years, and you mean he just got that far, and he's just going to give up and think, don't ever show me another pair of running shoes. Don't ever talk, sports to me unless it's on the box. I'll watch it. Exercise, forget it. You tell me exercise, you better be assuming I'm not too tired to get up. I'll whip your ass. I don't want to hear more about it. But there is an absolute unspoken similar arrangement that is built into life and man, that what little a man has done intellectually, also at that more or less same point, begins that same kind of excuse time. The life says, all right, no more. That is one of the purposes of mass entertainment. Not just watching sports, it's not just the physical vicarious thrills, as it might be mentioned of ex-jocks or just non-physical people watching sports, but it's also the intellectual vicarious thrills to stretch it by having somebody else think for you. And I'm not picking on TV, as you know, or movies or anything, because there's always been that. It's the collective. It's you taking the collective's ideas as yours, being entertained by them. But it's as though a man says, past the same age when he physically gives up exercising, etc., he tacitly also says what little exercise he had, if any, intellectually is, hey, don't talk to me anymore about that crap. I got me a job, I'm on an assembly line, or I'm doing something, I do not have to think about it, I don't have to read any goddamn manuals about it. All I got to do is put up with the boss, and all I got to do is show up. Now, of course, I'm exaggerating because many people do think, or they do believe that they're trying to continue their education, etc. But they do not continue, even if they'd ever started, the attempt to think. Not non-partisanly, not to think more than is necessary. If they're attempting to do anything that appears to be intellectual, it's not because they don't have to. Work that sentence out. It's for some purpose. Which is why if you try to explain this to them, and they go, why? A supposed, maybe I should have done another word, but I'm sure you'll get it. The definition, a thinker, a supposed dead man, an intended dead man, by all common expectations a dead man. That is, if you turn around and look at anybody and they're, let's say, well into their 20s, they are intellectually assumed to be, expected to be, supposed to be a dead man. And they don't have to lie down yet. They've got maybe another 40, 50 years. But it is progressive. It is incremental. They are slowly, day by day, dying and accepting it. It is almost a relief. So what is a thinker? It's somebody along the way between there and where you are now that almost decided, of course I'm putting the description on it for you, so no great shakes permanently, but the description is somewhere a man decides, screw this. I'm not going to lay down. I'm glad, of course, we don't have any pseudo-institutional religious people in here that think, now we're talking about life eternal. No. Nah, let me tell you, you're going to die. But a thinker, we're talking about somewhere else. Life's going to cut you down like bad corn. But a thinker, when he goes down, he's going to go down thinking, I didn't lie down before this. I did not intellectually lie down. You tried to bake my brains out. You tried to shrivel me up. And now sure as hell, just like I knew, you cut me off right down at the bottom line. But that final thought is, I didn't lie down on my own. which I'm sure impresses life, by the way. Well, I didn't mean to leave it again, because if we had religious people, they'd go, well, or mystical people, well, wait a minute, that means in some way we get the final laugh. That's why I threw in, I'm sure life's going to go, oh my God, what have I done? That's why it is, back to the question, if you had described an ordinary, the other corn stalks, what you're doing, they'd go, why? And that's what life would go, that's why. And of course, you're a real thinker then, that last second also, you wouldn't say anyway. That's why I was doing something like that. You wouldn't necessarily do that. It wouldn't matter, what worse is going to happen to you. But the point is, you wouldn't have an answer if life went, why? Which life wouldn't. But if life spoke for the whole cornfield, those others around you that realized, this is the one that wouldn't lie down intellectually. And now I recognize him. Now I know who he is. And there you go down. And if in your final second that life itself went, well, why? If you were still a thinker, you'd take it with you. The simple are never free, nor do they even suspect the possibility. And just as we're talking about, it has nothing to do with any kind of freedom outside the intellectual, because there is none. There's not even the possibility. But if you're simple, which is you think whatever the collective thinks, or you rebel against it doesn't matter. If you're dancing with the cats who are being manipulated by the great bird conspiracy known as Jim Henson and Friends, if all you do is think what is ordinarily available in the directions that are ordinarily available, either pro, con, up, or down, then you are simplistic. No matter what you call it, you can have several masters and even one, or I guess two, doctorate degrees in all sorts of varied arts and sciences. But if you think in a binary way, you're simplistic. There's no way out. If you think anything that there's opposition to, that even you can come up with the opposition, and what they'd say, it's simplistic. I don't care if you can speak like a diplomat, which I assume most of you know, they have their own diplomatese that makes the jargon of people like neurosurgeons and attorneys seem like child's play. They can talk sentences, just sentences, not paragraphs, that make you go into a daze. Very good diction, elocution, dressed up real nicely, and it's almost, you're just certain they're almost saying something of world-shaking significance, because they're speaking about some unpleasantness that is about to erupt into armed conflict, or perhaps is now, and he's stating one of the positions about what we will do if we're going to sit down and try and reach some kind of amiable agreement, if we can even find the middle ground, wherein these kind of conflicting parties, with such diverse, that we have talked and we have found, although there still remains certain and many, not to deny the kind of diverse opinions and views we have toward the boundaries and other miscellaneous things that may be laid upon the table, not discounting of those that have gone before. All right, that. The only point I'm doing all that can sound to be quite complex. And not just that, but you could hear the complexity of the sciences. It's harder to pull it through that one, but if that is the basis of it, if it can be conflicted, if there is a rational, a reasonable alternative, an opposition to whatever the thought is, it's simplistic. There's no way out. Now, you can't go prove it. Well, you can prove it. That's why the ordinary won't punch you in the mouth, even a diplomat. I guess afterwards he'd apologize. Think what came over me. But any thought that has opposition, that can entertain, that will produce. Now, I don't mean you have to agree with the opposition, but anything you stand up and say, anything one man can stand up and say, and another mind can stand up, and whether you agree with it or not, but another human can offer an opposite view, and it could be true. At least the sentence makes rhetorical sense. I mean, it's not like, one man can stand up and say, there is no God. And another man says, contrary, may I speak for the opposition? You say, well, go ahead. And he says, brown shoes do not go with a blue suit. Now, that's not it. You understand? The sentence, even rhetorically, has to make some sense. That if you're on the side that says, we should all be Protestants, and some of that sentence says, no, we should all be blue shoes. You say, no. But even if you were not religious, one man stands up and says, we should all be Protestants, and another man stands up and says, no, some of us or all of us should be Catholics. Let's say you've got no interest, but you understand what I'm saying, that no matter what the first idea was, if there is similar, reasonable opposition capable of being enunciated, then it's simplistic. There's no way out. That's it. Which, as long as we're here, I don't guess it's necessary, but shows again why whatever real thought would be, nonpartisan thought, how are you going to describe it? Because anything you say, if you can go, no, it's not. Which is about the best ordinary people can do. If you really strained and put forth your best birthday efforts, I don't know why you would, if you could think, well, I'm going to finally, to the world, present a nonpartisan idea, in words, one that nobody can oppose. Well, what ordinary people say, I'm going to tell the truth. You know, as they always call it, I'm going to reveal the truth as I now understand it. And everyone else, from Buddha on down, has been saying, no, you can't do that. It's not possible to put the truth in words. I believe I've got it. If you can say it, and even yourself think, you know, or tell it to an ordinary person, tell it to humanity, call them all together and say, I've got it, the truth, and they show up. And it's so mind-blowing, transcendental, unexpected, so short, direct, and heart-wrenching. You say, here it is, the truth. Now I'm not even going to try to make it up, but you say something. And here it is, we got the 5 billion people there on this planet listening, and you tell them. If you put into words, trust me, without me going through whatever it was you said, 5 words, 10 words, but the truth of reality, here's all it takes. There's some guy down here, a guy that's an ex-bricklayer, out of work, down front go, that ain't true. That's it. You understand? Well, in other words, they could be the most philosophically well thought out, complex, convoluted, erudite, anything you want to say, and you weave this great truth. Maybe I did it too much when saying 5 words, but you do the whole, maybe it takes you 30 minutes. Is that better? I think most of you got, though. And a hush falls over 5 billion people on the planet. And you think, I was right, I got it. And one guy says, that's a bunch of crap, that ain't right. I mean, that's all he offers. That's all it needs to be offered. It was just simplistic thought. City thought is reliable thought, even when it's not. I'll rest my case. The true father of all neural laws of levers and the efficient movement of large, inert objects. My apologies to the Greeks for redoing this, but well, no, it's not. They never apologized to me. Screw them. Was the first man who declared, give to me drugs in sufficiently large quantities and I can move the world. You know, there was a man who spoke about Fulcoms and etc. and give them a right place to stand. But now the neural laws of all levers, what makes things work is give me enough drugs. And you don't have to worry about finding a neighborhood dealer, as you know by now. All you got to do is your own neural transmitters. The rest of it's the cheap stuff. All you got to do is have partisan, opinionated thought, and you can move anything. As witnessed by my seeing a man who comes out with the best presentation ever given of the truth. Enough that, do I have to do this again, 4,900,900,000, almost everybody on this planet except one guy is struck by this truth you reveal. And this one guy down front goes, that ain't true. That's the only drug needed. That moved the world. You had the whole universe in this philosophical nutshell, this concept, this conclusion. You presented the world out here to the waiting, hungry humanity. And suddenly, when you said it, you thought, as far as you could tell, I mean, it's hard to see 5 billion people. Everyone is awestruck. And it's quiet for a second, and you think, God damn it, I pulled it off. I am as wonderful as I thought. But this one little man didn't need drugs, doesn't need pot, coke, didn't even need alcohol. His own neural transmitters are going to help him move, not just the world in this sense, but the universe. By him making this astounding observation, this counter observation. That ain't true. I didn't put the rest of it. I assumed you people would do it. You would have lost your crowd. But think. I gave you your own, let you fill in the blanks about how marvelous. I admitted beforehand what it was you came up with, more or less, rendered moot, just staggered humanity. Almost everybody. I admit that. You make up what it was. And it was crushed, crumbled before your very eyes by a man with equal precision, logic, reason, iron vice-gripped intellectual insight by saying, that ain't true. About that lapse of time, you would have noticed the crowd. You could begin to holler, wait a minute, we're going to have free beer and stuff later, and the crowd would pretty rapidly disintegrate before your very eyes. Give to me drugs in sufficient large quantities and I will move the world. That is part of what institutional picturizations of reality are about. Religion being the prime suspect, the most obvious suspect. All collective thought is sufficient large numbers of drugs. Because that's what all forms of collective thought is some form of drugs. That is, it is an attempted form. It doesn't always work in every case. But what the intent is, over a large period of time, you need to change the tape.
Keep going.
Okay. Is that collectively, their thoughts will be the drugs that override yours. Not that most people are putting up a great struggle. That's what we're talking about, that most people are quite satisfied that, well, here I am out of school. I don't have to work on my football scholarship. I don't have to keep my shape. I'm already married, and I'll probably be stuck with him or her the rest of my life. We resist it much, but it is the collective is like the world's largest drug pusher intellectually. That's what you're supposed to take. Like, what's the meaning of life? And suddenly an institution jumps up, a philosophical school of thought or a religion, again the easiest to identify, and it jumps up and says the purpose of life is to love your neighbor and support the Baptist church. And that, in a sense, is supposed to override any possible individual attempt you're making at thinking. Not to pick on religion, that's not it, but that is the drug, that is the ultimate lever that will move large, inanimate, inert objects. That is your mind. What's going on here? Brother, I'm glad you asked because I'm here to help you. I'm from the Salvation Army or the Catholic Church, and I'm here to tell you the purpose of life. The attempt is for the collective's thinking to override yours. And I'm saying override in the unlikely attempt that a person was actually struggling. I mean, a person will struggle, like maybe a guy will get out of school and off his football scholarship and gets married, sits down in front of the TV, and within 6 months has put on 40 pounds. And he happens to go back past some of the guys he saw in school, and they go, God damn, you look like the Goodyear blimp. And you think, yeah, you're right. And so you may make one more attempt like, well, I got to stop this. I know what, I'm going to cut my beer consumption down starting next week. Or I'll get out and walk around the trailer park. That is the kind of overriding. Now I'm saying that even if a person, like sometime a person will sit around and go, why does all these bad things happen to me? Why did my mother just die? Why did I lose my car? Why does all this stuff happen? And he sits there and he tries to think a minute. You know, and God, that's a lot of effort. Plus ordinarily you don't know where to go with it. And maybe his wife comes by. Or maybe just TV's on. That's the great one that they like to use. And suddenly here's a minister saying, do you wonder what the meaning of life is? And the guy goes, well, you know, I was just thinking that. And the guy says, you know, well, send your name and address or call this toll-free number and we'll send you a tract describing what God wants you to do so that you'll know the purpose of life. You know, a guy may go, well, hell, why not? You know, toll-free number. You might accidentally get one of those, you know, sex fantasy things. Now, did you understand this? Make a little more sense, the revisiting of history. The true father of our neural laws of levers and the efficient movement of inert objects was he who first declared, give to me drugs in sufficient large quantities and I can move the world. Another way to look at it, treat me with enough institutional, collective thought and I'll give up. That's moving the world. Not in some objective sense, but you move the world, that is. Yes, I used to worry about the meaning of life, but thank God I don't anymore. I became a Lutheran. Which if you don't listen, you think, well, I'm proud of him. Until you realize, what do you know anymore? And of course, I'm being silly now because you can't talk to an ordinary man. Now, personally, when he says, I used to worry, this is a common, it's nothing new, but for thousands of years. And a man will say, I was troubled, my heart was torn, my mind in a ramble, which is long before John Lee Hooker, but I was disturbed by life, the injustice, and etc. But then I became a Christian. And so if you just listen, you think, well, but then if you could, but the sudden you ask people, you ask this man, you go, and you mean not satisfied and answer the questions. Well, no. We've been through that, you understand. There was one in here I was hoping to get to, but described, again, that in a sense, the epilogue was, here it is. Turtles are a little comforted by encouragement intended for eagles. There was an original here, an opening. This is why religion and other human institutions both succeed and do not succeed, which in a binary world become operationally indistinguishable. It's just I gave it a slightly different turn we've talked about before, that what, by their own definition, not ours, but by any institution, education, religion again being the easiest, for their own stated aim, they cannot succeed. They do not succeed. All you got to do is ask anybody just momentarily, catch them in just a moment and ask them non-aggressively, does this work? Has it succeeded? What you said the aim of this church or religion was, has it succeeded? Well, no. And of course then they explain why. You can too by now. But the point is, it cannot, quote, succeed by its own definition, or it'd be self-destructive. It would be suicidal. But I was just trying to get you to see in from a certain other slightly different view, that the encouragement that would be intended for one group would not work for another. And there's no particular group in mind. It's just that which is collective wisdom and works in one man has no universal, no worldwide significance, no operational reality. And this is why religion and other human institutions both succeed and do not succeed, but they do it simultaneously. And in a binary world, they become operationally indistinguishable. Now, I know it doesn't seem that way to ordinary minds, as you know, because you look around and whoever you want to pick on, if you're an ordinary critic, you just say, well, for one thing, it can't do both, you'd say, and so. But if we tried to get past that, and you said, well, wait a minute, religions obviously don't succeed, or education doesn't succeed, or welfare programs doesn't succeed, spreading the wealth around doesn't succeed, trying to change human nature by some kind of imposed governmental, artificial, moral, religious standards does not work. But then you can look right around another way and go, wait a minute. This is about the best you get people to see that, all right, sometimes they work under certain conditions. And then you'd be wasting your time if you tried to ask a man, well, why did you start off speaking so dogmatically and unconditionally? You said religion never works. And we just admitted, look, we pick out instances where religion seemed to help some people who had been drinking, or people who have been violently antisocial and aggressive, and apparently in prison programs, whatever, just make it up yourself, and you say, well, here it is. Didn't this work? And they go, well, all right, sometimes. Forget now sometimes. Sometimes is all the time. It's just by somebody else's different watch. They're looking out of a different peephole. Everything succeeds and it doesn't succeed. In a binary world, it becomes operationally indistinguishable, which is why it's simplistic. It's just the ordinary mind does not see this, both successful and non-successful, simultaneously. It's just one person staying here saying, no, it doesn't work. But if you can say that, remember, you're revealing the great truth to 5 billion people. If you say this does not work, religion does not succeed, government does not succeed, civilization doesn't succeed, morality doesn't succeed, anything you want to say, you can say it with your very best, logical, reasonable, academic, any conditions and background you want to throw in, your best presentation of it, and somebody can stand up and give an equally good one. And if not that, somebody can just stand up and go, that ain't right. I know that's kind of disheartening. But someone can stand up and present an equally reasonable argument that it does or it does not. So it becomes, I know from their individual view it does not, this is not true, but they become operationally indistinguishable. Because you now have half the people, more or less, saying, this works. And you have the other half saying, no, it doesn't. And ordinary minds can't think about it, but you think about it. This is not just talk. It represents reality. Half of them say it does work, and half say it doesn't. You know what that means? It's working and not working. And it's operationally indistinguishable. It's not to them. They say, oh, I can distinguish, but they're not operating. They're opinionating. Because the operational reality is they're both functional. They're both correct. They're indistinguishable. City thought is reliable thought, even when it's not. Surprising how all this stays on the same subject if I take it and whittle it and force it and choke it, right? City thought is comforting thought, even when it's unsettling. I'm not sure that, I'm going to reread this one, I'm not going to say anything, but I don't know whether it came over off the written page. Another definition regarding man and his intellect. A potential volcano in a less than enthusiastic, less than anxious to become so, mountain. It's like life slips around in your early 20s and says, you know this thing up here, you're almost a potential. How would you like to be able to take a nap for the next 45 years or become a volcano? Of course, all you got to do is do that and life's gone. Life didn't have to stop and say, well, now I want you to take plenty of time and think this through. As soon as it asks you and you go, well, by the time you come to an answer, I assume you won't look around. It's like these stories of avenging angels or something coming to your door and give you 1 second to decide, answer this question, or die. By the time you go, there's your answer. Not a medical, not a psychological, not even a theological or anthropological, but an overall update. I knew everyone likes overall updates. If you can't do the hoodoo on you, you can't do the hoodoo. Which I'm glad we do not have any rabbinical or divinity students in the audience, because we certainly don't want to give them the blues or discourage them in any way in their calling. Because it could be worse. They could drop out of theological school and go to law school. City thought is honorable thought, even among scoundrels. From a man's city clothes, his aroma can never be worse, nor should it be. I didn't want to stay on this, but we keep talking around from certain other angles. You cannot be totally separated, even, I just point this out to belie, or to give you a different view of all these great mystical, transcendental dreams of man's transformation. There is a point past which you cannot. You got to be nuts. That is ordinary. But there's a point past which you cannot ever be separated from what you harmonially are. But yet, again, notice what the ordinary dreams of some great mystical transformation or some great personal adventure, some great change, whether it be in an actual institutionally religious setting like the conversion from being an infidel to being a Muslim, or from being a heathen to being a Christian or whatever. There are places beyond that ordinary people have thought about and dreamed about, places beyond the mere conversion to some institutionalized religion. It's the thing that in some way I could meditate, or even with drugs, and undergo some great transformation. And as always, as I'm sure you see by now, all of that, forgetting going past the childish aspects of a man's spirit and heart, what they're saying is my mind could develop, my own nervous system personally, go into a new area, somewhere. And of course then they talk about, getting in touch with cosmic forces and speaking with God, and they're talking about my brain, my mind. Many people can taste and smell it just enough that that's where it would be, but they don't know what to call it. It's like it would go somewhere that ain't here. So how better to describe it than, I went off on some kind of cosmic journey. But notice, just right quick, if you will, historically, whether they go to pains to point this out, you'll surely hear it, I've said it before, it's always tied to the physical. That's as far as they can take it. And the belief that I would become an absolute new person, which taken a little bit further is all religions' ideas, or the basis of all their ideas of paradise, a reward after death. They begin to enumerate what will be the rewards. They're all physical. That once we die and get over there, if you've been a good boy or girl, then you won't ever die again, which about covers it. That takes everybody's breath away. But you'll never get old. Everybody will be real good looking. Everybody will be blind, I guess, if you're from the Western world. You'll all be over 6 feet tall if you're a man. All women will have nice, and all men will be equally. We'll never get old. We'll never get weak. You'll never get sick. You never have to have root canal work. And of course, I'm being a little silly, but that is the description. Now, you could grab the Pope or the head rabbi of the world or somebody and say, wait a minute, I've sat here and listened to your religion. I've read all your tracts and the dogma of your religion, and it talks about this great life after death and why I should devote myself to the study and the ritual. But everything it says, it sounds all right. Not that there would be sick that said it, but you don't mention a thing about the very aspect of humans that make us different from beavers and attorneys. Hippos. That is, a man's intellectual life. And they would certainly jump right in and say, oh yes, well, aren't you troubled sometimes? Doubt, fear about what life's about? Yeah. Well, you don't have that anymore. Except all that is hormonal based anyway. So they're not telling you anything new, and it's always an afterthought. I just want you to see it is not part of the systematic conveyance and presentation of religion. Unless you were to ask specifically, and as I was trying to get you to see, it's of no consequence, they do not present as part of the package that in any way there will be a reward intellectually. It's almost like, well, you don't even have to think anymore, which really takes people's breath away. And they go, oh, now I really, where do I sign up? Won't ever get sick, won't ever be hungry, won't be as ugly as I am, and won't ever have to think, oh, hey, give me that. At any rate. Also, I just wanted you to see of how, in a sense, man's mind is continually misdirected when it gets up to that certain divergence in the wood. That people do believe that they can be stripped, if not now, in death. But the metaphysical idea of some kind of enlightenment, a satori, metaphysical experience in this life is the very thing here that they believe that a man can be stripped of his own aroma. And your own aroma is what you are hormonally. And once you see it in another way, it is anti-human. It is anti-life. Not really. But what it is a non-understanding of the incompletion of man. Because what they're saying, without knowing it, is, well, wait a minute, someday I'll die and then I'll be complete. Which I'm sure they've said that under religious conditions. Which, again, if you're used to it, I guess it sounds all right until you go, wait a minute. That's like the guy that said, I used to wonder what the purpose of life was, but I don't anymore. I became a Baptist. Like everything else, you just can't think about it. I used to wonder what the purpose of life was, but I finally got my doctorate in philosophy. No more. From a man's city clothes, his aroma can never be washed. There was another way of me slipping in, which I don't guess is necessary, but don't waste your time on that which is impossible. It can't be done. But what is possible, as many of you already know, is you can begin to interfere, you can begin to cause a certain kind of separation between the immediate running of the birds by the cats. The man said, I'll close with that, I'll re-quote the man who said, though with cats I dance, it is only in the ears of my own bird brain, the ears of my own birds in my brain, that I whisper the sweet nothings. It is only those that I can get some way away from the cats for a minute and whisper to them, to reveal myself. And conversely, Maybe it helps them. Maybe them help me. Anything to get them away from those goddamn cats for a minute, which you can do. Maybe. Oh, no, that's right. We're off tape.